How do we grow this influence of black leaders, men and women, that can represent our industry inside the ANC, inside the policy-making structures?
Get to grips with the digital environment, put together best practices, what works and what doesn't, very importantly.
In the project that we're doing in Chatlaat, we've created a linking bridge between those two little areas there. So it becomes a matter of just 10 minutes walk from one side to the other.
So my message to our CEOs and those chief investment officers is, where at the end of the day do you want to see your role?
So by treating all of our water back to a stage where we can bring it back into the process, we're in effect saving around about 35% of our water usage on site.
Hello, I'm Gordon Brown and this is greeneconomy.tv, and you're participating in the Circular Economy Show with Chris White. Today we're talking about how to connect the dots between everyday health issues and the environment that we exist in. Before we get started, let's hear a word from the sponsors.
This show is brought to you by GBCSA's Positive Impact Magazine.
Right, so Chris, welcome as always. Great to have you on the show. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest for you today. We're going to be speaking to our very own Byron McDonald, who is a stage 4 cancer sufferer. Byron, welcome to the show. Hey guys, how are you doing?
Hey Byron.
Great to have you on this side of the camera, Byron. So you know what we have here is a person in yourself who is experiencing the most dreaded situation anyone could ever face, ostensibly and potentially terminal cancer. You're very ill, you're suffering with it, you're fighting it every day, dealing with the psychological impacts, the physiological impacts. And at the same time, Chris and I have been speaking about some of the things that we are doing that are causing, these types of diseases. So we've had a show to talk about the chemicals that were found in the warehouse in Durban with the explosion. Last week we spoke about agriculture and the food that we're eating, and we spoke about the existence of all these toxins in the environment that are leading to these diseases. Well, today we're bringing it home. We're making it personal. We're talking to somebody who's actually suffering from the types of diseases that we've spoken about. So, Byron, just to get things started and just to introduce the topic, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your own experience. Tell us about the disease. Tell us about your diagnosis, your prognosis, what you're experiencing from one week to another, please.
So yeah, thank you again for having me on. It's so weird being on this side. Normally I'm sitting on the back side just watching you guys and being educated each week on the Circular Show. But yeah, so I've been diagnosed in 2018. It's now 3 years now exactly where I've been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and that's colon cancer, where it's spread to my liver and lungs, unfortunately, during that time already. So I've been given a bad diagnosis during that time. So moving forward, I've had an emergency op, but before my diagnosis, I had pains in my stomach and could not go to the loo normally as you should. Number 2, you go down, you have to go down the drain. But what happened is I went to my doctor, my regular GP, and I went to the emergency ward. They said, you're too young to have cancer or anything. You just probably need to poop yourself out or anything. So I've been misdiagnosed about 3 times. And then push comes to shove, no pun intended, push comes to shove. So what happened afterwards, I went to my normal GP. Then he recommended, you have to go through the system. Let's see if we can get someone that can maybe just do a scan on you, where they can do a sonar or something on you and see what step we can go take further. Lo and behold, they found out that my liver, just by a sonar, they found out on my liver that I had tumors on my liver, and they suspected it's malignant. So I went for a colonoscopy where you have to go put a pipe up your backside to see what's going to happen further. And then the blockage was there. And my doctor then gave me a diagnosis and he said, unfortunately, my friend, this cancer is so far spread already. The next step we're going to have to do is chemo. Then unfortunately for me, or luckily I would say, I don't know if it was luckily or unfortunately, because I'm still here today, what my diagnosis was, 6 months, I was rushed in emergency because my colon was blocked. So they had to cut that part of my cancer away to give access to my bowel. So I was stuck with a colostomy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the colostomy. So it's a bag where your rectum sticks out on the outside of your stomach. I don't want to be too graphic. Some people might not like it, but you have to go into detail. And then I was stuck with this for a year and a half. But fast forwarding, I'm still here, still fighting the good fight, facing certain complications. Still have cancer in my liver, my lungs, my colon. Has been faced with liver complications, also with COVID at the same time, also during this time, and now also with a port situation. But we can get into that into more detail. So yeah, I'm here. I'm fighting. I'm trying to fight the good fight. I don't know what caused my cancer. I don't want to blame anybody. I don't want to blame myself for stress. I don't want to blame myself for the environment I was in. But like I would like to say, it's a collective of things I would like to think. And that's why I'm coming to you guys, because you're part of the Circular Show and you've got all these things going, also knowing certain things with the products and the food and all these things. And these are the things I've been trying to delve into and experiment with. So yeah, I would like to just get into my questions and like to know more about circular economy.
No, what a pleasure. And I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, one doesn't know what triggers cancer. What we do know, however, is that there are a great many toxins in our environment that we know for a fact are carcinogenic and are having massive negative health effects for all of us. So, Chris, you're the expert on circular economy. You're the expert on the impacts and the problems, if you like, that we're experiencing. What sort of toxins are we finding in our water, in our food, in the air we breathe that are firstly there because perhaps of negligence, there because of ignorance, or there because it's good business to put them in there? Maybe give us some background and some context to this conversation about connecting the dots between what we do and the health problems that people are experiencing. Chris, I think you might be on mute.
Apologies. I said, yeah, I think it is a combination of all of these different things. As Byron says, you can't put your finger on it specifically because we are literally bombarded with toxins in our daily environment. And it's often the stuff we don't see, we don't think of, that we don't know about. And unfortunately, often we're in that environment, and to get out of that environment is either economically or logistically or feasibly impossible. But we need to manage that environment. But we also need to look at the problems and the mistakes that we've made in the past and make sure we don't do that again. And that's where circular economy comes into place. But if you look at our bombardment, we were chatting earlier about the building structures that we're in. You know, we live in structures that are built from unsustainable high energy materials with high VOCs, or volatile organic compounds. We complicate that by having to heat and cool our homes with gas or coal fires, or with air conditioners. And air conditioners are marvelous little contraptions that are able to circulate bugs and dust and other nunus around for continuously. But then the environment that we work in terms of the traffic outside, with the diesel fumes and the petrol fumes, the harmonic disruptions that we have with regards to the electronic devices that we use continuously. So we're constantly bombarded by radioactive waves. Byron, you're in a studio with microphones and computers. We're all on cell phones. We have cell phone towers. There's a lot of people who say, well, that's what it is. It's not. There's no one individual thing. There's a big 5G thing going on about it's going to kill everyone. It's part of the process, part of the problem. But it's this concentration of these different elements And then we compound that with our diet. And often those of us who are more fortunate are able to vary our diet because we can look at buying organic or making the right sort of choices in terms of more nutritious foods. But there's a lot of people out there who are suffering from other issues, such as diabetes and heart issues, and a lot of that is related to poor nutrition. And they don't have the opportunity. We have one of the highest obesity rates, but at the same time, malnutrition rates. How's that possible? And that's a diet issue. But then if you look at the food we're eating, everything is bleached, blanched, purified. Bread is a prime example. People who are allergic to bread, nobody's allergic to bread. The reality is that what we've done to the wheat is now that we bleach it, we blanch it, we purify it to the point where it no longer has the nutrients that are supposed to be in the bread that we eat. And we're seeing that from an organic perspective, people going back to stone ground flour and those sort of things. And good that we need to go that route. Sugar as well. First of all, it's bad for you, but secondly, we purify it to the point where it again becomes bad for you because we're putting all these chemicals in to create nice, clean white sugar, nice, clean white flour, nice, clean white caster sugar. These are all problematic fractions, and we eat fast food, which is full of junk and preservatives and processed meats, and there's just so many complications in that. But what we've got to remember is that we are the apex predator in this ecosystem, and ultimately what that means is that at the top of the food chain, we are the point at which all of these different things concentrate into us. That's where it's important to know that the immune system could be triggered by any one of these things, whether it's the pollution from plastic waste, sewage, the pollution in the water, the pollution in the air. So there are so many different things, but you've got to look after your own system.
Byron, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? Where do you live? What? Tell us a bit about your job and what you've been up to.
So I grew up in the streets of Bella. That's in the Cape Flat side. That's I'm so tough. But just on the work environment perspective, I've always been in the entertainment industry. So I've always been outside environment. But then I found myself in radio. So in the production side, so engineering more so to say. So I've always been working with equipment and enclosed defined areas in my workspace. So I'll always be in the booth with eggshells and the egg foam that you get to deaden the sound and so forth. And yeah, so there was never proper ventilation. So I don't want to blame things on that. But that's another point I wanted to bring across today. And I wanted to also, I don't want to log on a lot of questions, but something you hit the nail on the head with the food. You said going back to organic. Something that I found in my experience when I was dealing with cancer, you change your diet so quickly. And I don't want to digress from the question now, but I want to hit this question also. A lot of people buy free-range stuff and they think, now I'm eating organic, now I'm eating good food, I'm eating the best of food. Now I'm going to Woolies and I see the free-range packet. Oh, wow, I have the good chicken now on my side. And I was one of those until I watch your guys' shows and I watch shows related to this. And I'm like, but free range is not organic. I'm missing the boat here. So I wanted you to delve more into that so people can understand the difference between organic, free range, and these antibiotic foods also. If that's a question you can answer. And also the environment that you get yourself in with my workspace also. There was not proper ventilation, but they made us believe the air cons is getting you good circulation with good how can you say, oxygen coming through and so forth and so forth. But yeah, this is the question I wanted to pose. I know it's a lot of questions. I don't want to log a lot on, but those are the two. The ventilation for me is important. And the other one that's important to me also is the food. How do I know what's organic and what's not organic?
Well, I mean, we've got to be really careful about the greenwashing that goes on and everybody claiming to be green and organic. And that's why if you look at the restorative agriculture program we had last week, we talk about different organizations, that little video clip we had, where there's an organization that looks at keeping it real, making sure that anybody who's going to claim free range or organic is actually compliant with a series of audits and transparent applications to ensure that it is that. Yeah, the reality, as we said, chicken, free-range chicken. If somebody can say that their chicken gets to go walk outside for 3 minutes to go and have a pee, it's free range. That's not free range. It should be out there. Should be eating nunus in the grass. It should be eating a bit of grass. It should be looking at a real diet for a chicken and not being fed on fish meal and grain. And then because that comprises the immune system of the chicken, they then need to pump it full of antibiotics to keep it alive. And then there's a whole bunch of hormones in there as well to stimulate the growth, so that they only have to feed the chicken for 6 weeks, not for 8 weeks. All of those things are components that go into that food system, which we ultimately then consume. And the body does get rid of a lot of it, but we start to create these collections. How do we change that? And this is where we need to understand what green is, what organic is. One of the prime examples, and a very good friend of mine, Nonhlanhla Joy, who runs an organization called Umgibe, Farming, Training and Organics. She came up with this thing where she was dying of cancer. And she was out in the rural areas. She had nothing. There was no medical aid. There was no support. There was no family. And she's an intelligent, educated woman. And she said, well, what I need to do is I need to make sure that I feed myself first and foremost. And she came up with this whole design system, which she developed, called the Umgibe system, to look at growing her own vegetables organic in her own back garden with very limited space, very limited water. But she's cured herself. And it's by going through watching her diet very specifically and being very careful, obviously, from a health perspective. You've got to look at your exercise and other components. If Nonhlanhla is watching, she probably knows she doesn't do too much exercise. But that diet is very important, because it also helps to flush the system out if you're using pure products that don't have herbicides and pesticides and all these other problematic components that just bioaccumulate within the system. So there's a whole sequence of events that one needs to look at. And as I said, the problem is that there's a lot of people in this country and across the world who are not in the position to afford to get out of that trap. But this is where the system is broken. We are constantly pushing these low nutrient products like maize meal, and people use it as a staple diet. There's no nutrition in maize meal. So what do we do now? We now have the brand owners who are saying, no, our maize meal is better than your maize meal. So we're now throwing in artificial minerals and artificial nutrients and artificial vitamins and saying ours is more healthy. Not at all. You want to start looking. Those are all chemically generated systems. What's it going to do to your body? So there's a lot of nonsense out there in terms of what we're putting into our bodies. You look at margarine as a prime example. Anybody who eats margarine, rather go out and suck on the exhaust pipe of your car. It's much healthier for you. It's basically plastic and oil, and there's somebody managed to come up with this as a byproduct and say, what the hell are we going to do with this stuff? And they said, oh, let's see if people eat it, and branded it as margarine. Eat butter. Butter comes from a cow. You know where a cow comes from, but margarine is a chemical product. So we've got to look at all these different issues and understand what it is we're putting into our bodies, and most people know. So education. And only through education will we then start to see a consumer behaviorism that starts to demand a particular type of product in their diet, in their lifestyle. And through that education, that consumer spend will start to change politicians, it'll start to change brand owners, it'll start to change retail centers. So we are the ones who have the choice to change the system. And that's where the circular economy allows us to do that through all these different components: wastewater treatment, our water management, energy systems, agriculture, tourism, infrastructure. Those are all components that come out from the circular economy that allow us to look at changing what's broken and move to a system that's going to allow us to make it better.
Right, I just want to jump in very quickly and highlight the fact that this is an interactive show. If you're watching us right now on your social media network, you can post questions and we'll respond to them. So please jump in, ask any question you like to Chris or to Byron, and we'll tackle those right away. Just some questions from my side back to you, Byron. You asking about diet. How did you respond? You mentioned that you made changes. You mentioned that you experimented, that you perhaps now subsequently found stuff out. just explain to us what it feels like for you to understand that your body is now self-destructing. You immediately look at what you're eating. You're now looking for advice. You're trying to figure it out. What can you change? How can you change in order to slow this down or to do something about it? Just talk to us a little bit about your own experience, specifically as it relates to your reaction and how that affected your diet choices.
You just hit the nail on the head when you said your body is self-destructing, because that's basically what a cancer cell is. It's like a healthy cell says, I'm going haywire and I'm take over here and I don't want to be part of these guys anymore. So basically for me, I because I'm not educated into diets and into my body so much, because growing up, we are not educated in our bodies. We neglect our body. We think, okay, it's here. We got a pill for everything. We've got there's a pill for this. We grow up knowing that pharmaceutical in our head, like you said also, and these brand names that, like you just spoke about margarine. How many of us have not grown up in our house? Oh, margarine, because it's lekker. It tastes good. It smells good on your bread and your butter, but you're not educated enough to know about these things. But because struck with cancer, I had to educate myself. But the first thing I did, I educated myself on my own body. And a lot of people make this mistake when they ask me advice. And I keep on telling them, I can't give you advice what to do with your body, what to eat, what pills to take, because there's so many things that differ from this. And if you can understand me when I say this, that our blood types differ. There's a lot of things that differ in our body. Our mindset also, that also affects your body. Your environment, where do you grow up? Do you have a healthy environment? Are you in a closed, confined? How many people do you live with? All these things are collective that I had to understand, because I was treating myself as a statistic. In the end of the day, I was saying, okay, that guy has colon cancer. He did these drugs. He had these type of vitamin C's, vitamin F, whatever you need to eat. Like now with COVID-19, everybody's saying use ivermectin. It's gonna help you. It's gonna save you. I don't know. I can't tell you to use it if it's gonna save you or not gonna save you. Get vaccinated. It's gonna save you. It's gonna help you. I don't know. I can't give you that advice. So it's really a personal thing when it comes to health, when it comes to your body, because you can't compare yourself to anyone else. And this is where the key word came into me, moderation. I had to understand, and this is my opinion, what did my grandfathers eat? What did my grandfather's fathers eat before me? So I said, oh, we used to eat a lot of stew and a lot of this, because studying myself, this is just my opinion, I said, genetically, I was born through these people and they were forced these type of foods as they ate. Maybe that's good for my body. While I'm behold, I'm still here after 3 years. It's working for me. And this is the type of food systems. And I eat a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But I don't neglect my body also and say, you want that piece of cake, don't eat it. So I'm not telling people go and eat cake and you're gonna be fine. You want that piece of cake, don't eat it, you're gonna die. I say no, your body is craving maybe for it. Is it, you need to distinguish, is it just because you want it? Is it just the taste buds, or does your body need it? And this is something you have to find out between yourself. And with the work environment also, I had to understand also, I had to take a step out of my office, take a step here to get some fresh air. Can't sit for 2 hours, can't sit for 3 hours because my eyes get strained. There's certain parts of your body you have to start understanding, and it's a personal, like, we don't want to emphasize too much. Everything is a personal thing. Not even the doctor can tell you really what to do. He can guide you. And that's the point I came across in the end of the day.
Yeah, so Chris, Byron's touching once again on the environment, the work environment. What is the responsibility of employers? And talk to us about some of the thinking and the body of knowledge and practice around healthy indoor environments. What is a sick building? How do you fix that? Let's talk about workers who work in highly toxic environments. How important is it for companies to be aware of their workers' health, and what sort of things can they do to make their offices healthier, better?
Wow, there's a huge amount to unpack there, and I think often the problem it again comes down to education. Often employers don't understand their role and their responsibility in terms of the health of the environment for their workers. And again, it's who has the opportunity to do that. If you work for one of these global companies like Facebook or Google, you look at their work environment. Man, I want to work there. You know, everyone cycles to work and they get all these scrumptious meals and pedicures, and you know, they get to walk.
Yeah, and they live in green buildings.
Exactly. So yeah, the problem is that if you look at a lot of our legacy buildings are unhealthy. And it's not because they were done so on purpose. It's because we just didn't know better. We took an economic decision. We manufactured something that was a problem. Lead paint is a prime example. I mean, for years, we used lead paint for just about everything, and everyone was quite happy until we figured out that the accumulation of lead in the environment was killing people. That was exacerbated by the fact that we started using lead as a lubricity agent in petroleum products. So that was also bioaccumulating in the environment. Asbestos roof sheeting was the roof sheeting material of choice. Now we know it kills you. So these are all things that we learn, and we've made mistakes, but we need to make sure we don't go back and make the same mistakes. But through that, what we've also learned is how to understand that built environment. So there's a lot of things that are happening at the moment. Europe is a prime example. The UK are running around like scuttled mice at the moment, because they've got the massive big carbon reduction targets to meet. And one of the key ones that they have is the lack of thermal efficiency in their building structures. So they're looking at retrofitting a lot of buildings to ensure that they don't need as much heating in winter, which is 9.5 months of the year, and then blasting air conditioners for the 3 weeks of their summer. But it's understanding that those have impacts as well. I mean, at the moment, they're reeling in the UK because the costs of gas and power have gone up fourfold in the last couple of years. And a lot of that is because we're trying to control the environment that we have that is wrong. So moving forward, we have groups like the Green Building Council South Africa who are looking at these green systems. But again, it needs to be passive and active. One needs to look at it where you want to try and reduce the amount of energy input, because the built environment contributes 39% of all carbon emissions that contribute to global warming. And yet we need to house 1 billion people across Africa and Asia in the next 30 years. And if we continue to build with cement and concrete and steel and clay, brick and wood, we're going to continue to destroy the planet. So we need to change that system. We know the system is broken. We need to change it. But in order to change that, we have vested interests who've invested 100 years of company money into developing these unsustainable systems, who are loath to change. So again, education is that the person on the street needs to know that when I buy the next house, I want to buy a low carbon house with a high thermal efficiency. And this is what I want. I demand that as a household, and we should be doing the same thing in terms of our service delivery. It should just be RDP houses. It should be looking at highly thermally efficient, low VOC, healthy houses, and it can be done probably cheaper than conventional. So there's no reason why not to change, but people need to be aware of how that environment affects them, and understand what they can do themselves in terms of changing it.
Chris, just from my side, I want to just touch on, so we're running out of time, but there's a couple of big points I'd like you to touch on. Then I want to go back and have a chat to Byron again about his view of his own road to health. So Byron, start thinking about, what are you doing? I want you to tell us kind of how you see things at the moment and how you see the road forward. Before we get there, I want to touch on two major things. One is the issue of the insertion into food groups of colorants and preservatives and things that sweeteners, perhaps flavorants, where there's already some level of knowledge that these products are either carcinogenic or potentially carcinogenic or have ill health effects. What is the responsibility of these companies to continue to add these things, continue to sell them? I suppose we can add the cigarette industry and others. But before you touch on that, I just want to quickly acknowledge a comment that we received to say that people need to add value to their lives by going organic. So Carol Bowers, thank you very much indeed for that comment. 100% agree and super duper. So Chris, from your side, talk to us about these situations where companies know, or there's an implication or a knowledge or strong evidence, and yet we continue to sell these things. How do you perceive that?
Well, we're seeing a change globally. We're running a bit behind schedule in Africa and the developing countries, but we're starting to see these sort of things in Europe and the States. In the States, there's now a ban on PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyls, which are what we call the forever chemicals, which we bioaccumulate because we're at the top of the food chain. Those end up in our waste, which goes into the wastewater system, which we now think we're really clever because we're going to use this as fertilizer and spread that over the land, and it just bioaccumulates further and further. So the House of Senate and Congress have now approved the fact that all sewage sludge needs to be dried and incinerated so that it doesn't further pollute the environment. And we're seeing those big kind of changes. Now, these are big economic decisions that they've made. They're going to cost a lot of money, but it's better for us, for our environment. We are seeing things in terms of the labeling requirements and policies that are coming through from Europe in terms of what's in food and what you're allowed to put in food. And often remember that a lot of the more processed your food is, the more gunk it's going to have in it, because it needs preservatives, it needs congealants, it needs acidity control, it needs all these different chemicals to keep this non-natural thing in a format that looks like food. So, firstly, just don't eat it. Just don't eat it. Hell no. I mean, I'm a bad one to say that because I'm Scottish, and I'll always try and find a way to find black pudding. It's probably the worst thing for you, but man, I love it. And we always do that. So we've got to look at understanding these sort of systems. And again, moderation is an important part of that. But look at understanding what's on that product. So if you're going in and you're looking at the ingredients on the product, there is a requirement for all manufacturers to list the ingredients on those things. And if you look at something and you don't understand what it is, don't put it in your body. Easy. There's all sorts of different things. Even cigarettes that Byron was talking about. Cigarettes, tobacco is actually not that bad for you. The problem is that the cigarettes have all of these accelerants and drying agents and chemicals that are inside there, which is what's killing us. That's why some of the smokers go back to the old pocket rolled up tobacco stuff, and they think it's better, or the green stuff, which is probably even better. But we've got to look at what we're putting into our bodies, and the reality is that it's the lack of education. We don't know, we don't understand, we don't follow through, because we take it for granted. As Byron said right at the beginning, right from when you're starting to be educated, they teach you maths and science and all the rest of it. They don't teach you what your body is doing. You just accept that it's there. And then it's this vehicle that's going to carry your bodily self forward for the next 80 to 100 years. Don't take it for granted. Understand it, and there's a lot to learn from that.
Chris, final sort of big picture topic before we go back and chat to Byron again. Talk to us about the health impacts of industry. Industry specifically like the petrochemical industry. We hear about here in the Cape, we've got these big refineries. We hear about people suffering from cancers and all sorts of health impacts. Talk to us about Eskom and their coal-fired power stations in Witbank and some of the litigation that's going on and the suffering that people are experiencing. And how do we juxtapose, or how do we position that, whilst also talking about things like a just transition, and we need coal and people need jobs? I mean, just perhaps give us some context there in understanding how to just connect the simple dots between switching on a light switch and the kind of cancer that Byron is suffering from.
Okay, that's another whole show you just unpacked in one question. So try and put it briefly. Again, we're running way behind everywhere else. And if you look at where Europe was 20 years ago, Europe was pretty much in a mess. But if you go on to Sky News, for example, at the moment, you look at the weather report in the morning, they don't just look at the temperature, they also look at the air quality, which is mapped out now, and they are doing something about it. There's policy behind it in terms of what cannot be done. And there are strict regulations around monitoring air quality. And now if you go to the likes of Helsinki or anywhere in Sweden, Denmark, they have some of the best air quality in the world. We don't. We are one of the worst. And if you look at coal, is one of the big problems around that, which is why Europe is going away from coal. There's still a few problems. There's still some coal is needed. Gas also has its own pollutants. But if you look at the air quality around the Mpumalanga area, I would not want to live there. And again, this is where it comes down to politicians, because it is against the Constitution to disregard people's health. The Constitution says we have a right to a healthy environment, and yet they push coal and they push these old technology systems that are spewing sulfur and NOxes and SOxes and other furans and dioxins into the environment that these poor people are going to have to breathe in every day, which is not going to be good for you. It's as simple as that. And Byron, sometimes it's luck of the draw. Some people have a better immune system, others don't. Something might trigger in one person, not the other person. So it's often difficult to track that down. But the reality is that we need to move away, and that transition to a circular economy and looking at alternative energies, looking at alternative systems, energy efficiency first. Before you create new energy, stop wasting the damn stuff you've got right now. Let's look at then renewable systems going forward. And the renewable systems are not in the interests of government, because Eskom can't sell the sun. And it's as simple as that. Eskom can't sell the wind. The reality is that coal mining means that we have a whole bunch of investment into economic empowerment around extracting this non-renewable resource out of the ground and selling it at inflated prices to a company that is incapable of burning it properly to produce the electricity that we need. These are all broken systems, and that needs to change. But when you've got government who is linked into that as a financial income, you then have a conflict of interest with regards to what is the right thing to do and what's the wrong thing to do. We need to, as citizens of the country, stand up and say, we want this. We don't want that. So circular economy provides solutions to all of these things. It changes that linear economy into a restorative, regenerative economy. There's a good way forward. It's a sustainable way forward. Everybody's health. At the moment, the only people who are benefiting out of this are politicians and pharmaceutical companies.
Sure.
Chris, thanks for that. And you've actually answered my question. My final question to you was to say, what's the road to health? How do we move forward? I want to ask Byron that question. Byron, you're in the thick of it, right? You're struggling every day. You're getting up in the morning. You're ill. Your body's fighting you. You've got doctors telling you your days are numbered. How are you fighting to try and restore your own health, to regenerate yourself? How are you coping mentally, and just give us some of the insight into the things that you are doing to be able to try to find some light at the end of this tunnel for yourself. And what advice do you have for anybody listening and who's suffering from a disease of any kind and needs some inspiration to go forward?
Yeah, so when I normally speak like this, I try to say as factual as I can, because sometimes people think this is all imaginary stuff when you tell them certain things about the mind also and the body. But for me, and because I'm already in the situation, and unfortunately I can't treat the root cause at the moment, I take it one day at a time. And it sounds like a mundane thing that people say you take it one day at a time, but literally I take it one day at a time. So if I discover that I have a new pain or something is happening to my body, that's now the new root cause, and I treat that cause. I can't go back and try to fix what's happened to me and what's spread already. So this is how I treat my body. And like I speak about moderation of eating, of how I need to eat, how I need to drink. And some days there will be days I can't drink water. And then I can only consume other liquids. And I'm well aware the other liquids might harm my body more, but I need to see the pros and cons above it. And I might just have to drink that Energade because it's liquids and it's going to hydrate me. But I know it's bound with sugar. And I'm not condoning this, but unfortunately, this is how I'm treating myself every day now. I'm not saying I'm going on a strict diet. Oh, wow, I can't drink water anymore. I'm suffering now. I'm going to go out and die rather. I'm going to say, okay, if I have to drink that Energade, the pros are better than me now saying, no, don't drink the Energade because it might harm the cancer a bit more. I don't treat it like that. I treat my body as a vehicle, and I say the vehicle needs a little bit of pumping up in the wheel. It needs a little bit of oil now. Unfortunately, the motor needs to be redone, but I don't know where I need to start. Otherwise, I need all of this money, and the motor might not come out good. And I can't buy a new motor, unfortunately. This is the body. You can't buy a new one overnight. So this is how I treat my body. I treat it as a vehicle. If I find a problem, I don't try to fix it. I try to treat it. And the mind, again, is my combustive system, where I just say each day at a time, sending signals to the right parts and saying, move on, move on, move on. You can get through this. And this is how I'm treating myself day by day.
Well, Byron, you're an inspiration to me and to everybody who engages with you. Thank you so much for everything you're contributing to this business and to this show. And I've got no plans whatsoever from a point of view of looking forward. I know you're going to make it. I know you're going to fight this thing, and you'll be there. And what a pleasure! But I just want to say that, you know, when we talk about the topic, we often talk about these big ideas, stuff that's out there, right? So we talk about climate change, you know, and we speak about, you know, even high impact images like a dead bird being opened up and you're seeing plastic inside, or a straw sticking through a turtle's nose, or a polar bear sitting on an ice block. It's easy to think that, well, this is all these problems, the environmental challenges, really, they don't really affect me. Well, guess what? They do. And, you know, Byron, you suffering from ill health, as we've said many times, we don't know what triggered that, but we certainly do know that the toxins that we are putting into the environment every single day, not just the environment, into the food we eat and the water we drink, is making people sick. And we've got to do something about it. So I thank you so much for coming to the show, for sharing your own experience with us, for sharing your insights with us and your inspiration. We wish you the best as you deal with and you combat and you regenerate and you restore yourself and you come back to us 100%, and we take it through from there. Any final comments from Chris or Byron at this point, just before we wrap up? Chris, any final thought?
No, I think just in terms of looking at embracing the circular economy and looking at changing the system. So that's it for me.
100%.
Yeah. So that last comment that came in, and it's someone personal, I popped it up. Convenient lifestyle living has resulted into growing fast food production in the industry. That hits the nail on the head. You see, my final comment would be, and this is just my opinion, that something I could not have done, treat the root cause. And this is what we're not doing as a country, as a world. We're not doing these things. We rather say, if it's going to be, we'll find a way to fix it, right? And this is where the problem lies. We're acting as mechanics, where we know this thing is going to give problems. Let's roll it out. We know it's going to have problems, but we'll fix it anyway. But in the end of the day, you're going to sit with a worse situation, because you're in an environment that's the world, and at the end of the day, needs destroying it, which I believe, my opinion again. And this is where the circular economy comes in. We need to understand how to reuse stuff, how to use stuff in the end of the day, and the longevity of stuff, to not reuse it. And this is my important message that I want to get across, if it's relative, that treat the root cause in your life, be it with your computer, be it with anything you have. Don't wait for something to break before you fix it. And this is what we need to do as we move forward in this economy, I would like to believe. And that's the point I want to bring across.
No, thank you very much, and a super valid point indeed. So thank you to Byron McDonald. Thank you to Chris White for your contributions. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next week at the same time, Wednesday, 1 o'clock, for the Circular Show. Watch the media for announcements as to topics and themes. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye for now.
How do we grow this influence of black leaders, men and women, that can represent our industry inside the ANC, inside the policy making structures.
Get to grips with the digital environment, put together best practices, what works and what doesn't, very importantly.
In the project that we're doing in Chatlath, we've created a linking bridge between those two little areas there. So it becomes a matter of just 10 minutes walk from one side to the other.
So my message to our CEOs and those chief investment officers is, where at the end of the day do you want to see your role?
So by treating all of our water back to a stage where we can bring it back into the process, we're in effect saving around about 35% of our water usage on site.
This show is brought to you by GBCSA's Positive Impact Magazine.